Oh, good. So, as some of you may be aware, a couple weekends ago we were celebrating Pride here in Amsterdam, but obviously with one big issue, which would be what we're experiencing at this very moment. And at the time, I was lying on my couch, staring at my ceiling, going, "This sucks.
What's that?
This sucks. This whole thing sucks. This whole pandemic thing sucks."
Okay.
You're welcome. And I realized that I just couldn't do nothing. And so I went to the closet, I put on my best shirts, and I went to this bar that I knew was having a private party. But even then, the doorman had to be strict. Let me know if this sounds familiar. It should. Any symptoms? Yes. Yes? Not the right answer. Any symptoms, social distancing in effect, and of course, we have to remain seated as much as humanly possible. Now, as I'm sure we're all aware, during the time of Corona, beggars cannot be choosers. So if celebrating Pride meant sitting there, listening to music, then at least I could be happy that we live in a country where weed use is tolerated. In which case, I definitely took advantage of that. Now, as I walked in, it was this scene that some of us may be familiar with, where you see 2, maybe 3 people with a table between them, and then of course you have that 1.5 meter from any other table. So you have all these kind of pods of people out there in the space. And I'd seen that bar when there was at least 100 people. You know, when it was so close that you could feel the sweat of another person on your skin, which sounds kind of gross, but in the right moment, it's kind of what you want, right? Like, but now, it just looked empty. And I'd gone to that bar by myself. And I thought, this might be cool for a Monday night, but when all you want to do is party for Pride, this isn't going to suffice. And I said to myself, I should just go home. I'm by myself. I'm not going to meet anybody. What's the point? But then I remembered me lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, going, this sucks. And I figured, one drink. If I have one drink, then at least I can say that I've done something. So I order a drink, and I sit down, and this is when I meet Rashida. Now, Rashida is the kind of person that everyone needs to meet at least once in their life. Because with glitter and sparkles and crystals adorning her face, she turned to me with this bright, big smile and invited me to talk about space. Yeah, nice, right?
Yeah.
And like, at first you might think that like, okay, space, like personal space, as in the space we have to keep between ourselves. No, this was like, you know, planets, solar systems, the final frontier, live long and prosper, that kind of space. And me, with my Star Trek hat, placed proudly on my head, was more than happy to have this conversation with her. And as we began to talk about warp speed and hyperspeed and the difference, how one is a fantasy of George Lucas and the other one is a scientific theory, I began to notice that the bar doors had started to close. And that the music was turning up ever so slightly. And I recognized the song. It was Rhythm is a Dancer. Now, as that oh so familiar beat from the 90s began to play, I noticed how it began to affect all these little pods of people floating out there in that distant space. A tap of the toe, a nod of the head, a roll of the shoulders, right? What's that? Let's do that a little bit longer. Ooh. All of this as movements to try and test the boundary of what seemingly was in place as we walked into the door. But nobody dared to get up from their seat. That is nobody except for Rashida, who had blasted off from my side and gone all the way to the dance floor, where she landed, and then she was like on her own little planet. She was moving her body, she was whipping her hair back and forth, she was feeling that rhythm is a dancer. And all of us were watching her being like, okay, the bounce is going to come by, and they're going to bring her back down to earth. Someone's going to do something. But I don't think at this point Rashida could have been stopped. So nothing happened. She continued to dance, and that's when I felt the compromises begin to go through my system. I began to say to myself, okay, maybe I can dance a little bit, but we'll stay apart. And I won't do it for too long, just a little taste. So of course, I become the second to join her. But try as I can to keep up to Rashida, this is a task that no mortal man can complete. And I grew tired. So I said, you know what, I'm okay with going back down to earth. I'm getting off this planet, and I'm going to go to the bar and get myself a beer. So I get a beer, and I find this couch that's situated in the back of the bar. And from this couch, I can actually still see the dance floor. And by this stage, those little pods of people began to stand up, and they began to sort of engage in the dance as well. And my attention fell on one particular person. He had blonde, gold hair, a black turtleneck, and he was twisting and contorting his body to the music, a disciple of Rashida, of course. And as I'm watching him dance, I see this other person drift across the empty space of the dance floor to tap this man on the shoulder. And the young man turns around, and his eye is bright. He has this excited expression. And then they hug like friends who hadn't seen each other in a really long time. But then, that hug lingers. And the longer it lingers, the more I can observe this mechanism of doubt starting to spiral in their mind. Both of them are asking themselves, am I holding this hug for too long? But as one person begins to let go, the other person only squeezes tighter. And from this moment, I'm seeing this event as sort of a planetary exploration. Maybe I'm inspired by what Rashida and I have been talking about. Because in my mind, this pushing and this pulling, this pushing and pulling, it's like watching two planets do a sort of orbit in space together. And they're fighting against that orbit until the law of physics comes into place and they equalize. And now the two of them are like this system together. And they're kind of just swaying together now. And it's like they don't even hear the music anymore. Instead, it's like from the surface of this planet, they're sending signals to each other. And then I see it. An exploration of the thumb across the other man's arm. Like a probe testing the terrain. And that thumb becomes a full sweep of the arm, up and down, as though he's scanning every last little bit of his arm. And by this point, there's not an ounce of tension in their bodies. They're both so relaxed into this hug. And then at that moment, they hug again. Only this time, they hug tight. As tight as can be. As though these two planets within my imagination are going to squeeze together and form into one giant superstructure. They hug tightly. But of course they don't fuse. They're two people. Keep up, come on. So they go back to that swaying motion. And now they're swaying back and forth just like they did before. Only this time, their lips slowly align and they kiss. Now it's at this stage that I recognized how long I had been staring at this couple. And to be honest, it began to feel a little bit intrusive. And I began to fear that if they turned around and saw me with this wide-eyed stare, that I'd have to give them an explanation. And my best explanation is like, I'm this astronaut in this space station, and there are these planets. And I don't think that would have really worked. So I got up from the couch, and I walked back to the dance floor. Only as I was walking, I had this thought circulating in the back of my mind. And I asked myself, how long had it been since I was last touched like that? How long had I been this vessel drifting through empty space with only a kind of life support to sustain me, the bare necessities? And that's when I saw Rashida. With the crystals and the glitter, reflecting the bar lights around her, her eyes bright and full of stars, and As I drifted towards her, I knew that it didn't matter the space or the infinite expanse that we feel between us. There was always this want of touch, like a powerful form of gravity that would pull me in and help us feel connected again. Thank you.